the ninth, which implies that this will be the ninth video under this course, conflict resolution. The topic that we'll be looking at for this module is conflict dynamic and analysis. So which implies that we'll be looking at the meaning of conflict dynamic and meaning of conflict analysis, where we'll be analyzing different type of conflicts that we have. And for the conflict dynamic, we'll be looking at how conflict is going during how conflict is going during different crises. Maybe it is escalating or getting cool and the likes like that. And for the contents of the module, we have conflict dynamic and analysis, we have conflict analysis, we have basic steps in conflict analysis and the likes. So, and introduction, we have the meaning of conflict dynamics and conflict analyzing in one. And here we have conflict dynamics refer to the ever-shifting patterns of interaction among actors, state, non-state groups, and external interveners that shape the course of a dispute. So these dynamics are driven by a mix of material interest. This material interest could include control over resources or territory. So those are the things that are driving these dynamics that we are talking about. It could be security concerns and the likes. Under the security concerns, we have the classic security dilemma, whereby we have one side is defensive moves are seen as threatening by the other, and additional factors like identity, historical narratives, and norms. So now, analyzing a conflict, therefore, that is conflict analysis, can be seen or defined as a process that requires looking beyond the surface of violence incidents to uncover the underlying incentives, trigger points, and feedback loops that can either push the parties toward escalation or create openings for de-escalation. So by mapping these elements, power balances, institutional constraints, communication channels, and the roles of third-party mediator, we can better understand how a conflict may evolve and identify leverage points for peaceful resolution. So for this course, mainly for this topic, what we'll be looking at is the dynamism in conflict and the analysis in conflict. So we'll be looking at if a situation or scenario whereby we have a conflict to be escalating or de-escalating, how are we going to know that status? So let's look at meaning of conflict dynamic now. So we have conflict dynamic and analysis. Conflict dynamic simply means how a fight or war keeps changing as it goes along. Just like we have mentioned earlier, that it means it is a process whereby we try to monitor how a conflict or a crisis is going. Maybe it is escalating or de-escalating as it should be. So it is the way the situation gets worse that is escalate. The way the situation calms down, which is de-escalate. The way the situation stalls or completely shift direction over days, which could also over months or years. Conflict dynamics refer to the continuously evolving interdependent processes and patterns of interaction among parties involved in a violent or potentially violent dispute, encompassing the escalation, stagnation, or transformation of hostility over time. So, however, we have scholars in international relations, not only international relations, but also scholars in peace and conflict studies, scholars in political science they all conceptualize these dynamics as a complex system shaped by structural factors which could be power, asymmetries, resource distribution, historical grievances, and can also be actor-related variables. So under actor-related variables, we have strategies, we have perceptions, we have leadership decisions, we have internal factionalism, and also contextual triggers, which these contextual triggers can be external interventions, can be economic shocks, or identity mobilization. So now let's move on to the meaning of conflict analysis. We should be able to justify between conflict dynamics and conflict analysis. And it is important that we grab this, that in conflict dynamics, it is mainly studying the process of how conflict is going or war is going, whether it is escalating or de-escalating, whether it's stagnant or stall, and the likes like that, to know when to bring in negotiation process and the likes. So this will help negotiator and mediator in fostering their works. So let's look at the meaning of conflict analysis now. Conflict analysis is a crucial tool for the design, for the implementation and evaluation of peace building programs, whether for the prevention of armed conflict, attempting to bring war and violence to an end, to also help societies recover in the aftermath of war, or to attain greater justice and equality. And it can also be seen as that conflict analysis is the deliberate study of the causes, actors, and dynamics of conflict. Yes, that is the simplest form and in layman definition that we can easily understand when we are talking about conflict analysis. It is the intentional study of the causes, that is what caused the conflict, the actors involved in the conflict, who are those that are involved in the conflict, and the dynamics of conflict and how the conflict changes. Maybe during the process it escalated or it de-escalated. So, and we have another meaning of conflict analysis to be that it is the systematic, evidence-based process of examining the root causes, proximate triggers, actors, interests, power relationships, dynamics, and broader context of a violent or potentially violent conflict, in order to understand why it emerged, how it evolves, and what opportunities exist for prevention, mitigation, or resolution. In short, our conflict analysis has to do with a proper analysis of a conflict or war that includes the causes of the war, the parties involved, the solution, the aftermath of the war, what happened after and the best way to prevent something like that. So this is conflict analysis as well when we are analyzing a conflict generally. So now let's look at the basic steps in conflict analysis. We have step 1, step 2, and step 3. We have step 1 to be analysis of key conflict factors. That is the initial stage of conflict analysis. This is the initial stage of conflict analysis, and it involves identifying the main drivers of tension. These include examining proximate or immediate factors that can quickly fuel violence in the short term, as well as structural or deep-rooted factors that create long-term instability. That is trying to identify the main conflict factors, those things that can easily or immediately be a factor that fuel violence, or those that is structural, which could be deep-rooted, that can also fuel long-term instability or long-term violence. So we have step 2. When we are trying to analyze conflict, we look at this step 1, that is analyzing the key conflict factors. What is the main factor of the conflict? Why is the conflict erupting? Why is it happening? Understand that. So after understanding that, we also look at the step 2, which is actor analysis. These are the people or groups or organizations or countries involved in the conflict. So this is the second step, and it focuses on mapping and understanding the individuals, the groups, and institutions that are involved in or affected by the conflict. Not only countries that are involved in the conflict, but also countries that are affected by the conflict. So we are referred to as actors or stakeholders. These are typically divided into 3 categories. So now that's the second step when we are analyzing conflict. And the third step, we have analysis of capacities for peace. That is the final core step, and it is to identify existing resources within the society that promotes peaceful and constructive conflict management. These capacities for peace may include traditional dispute resolution mechanisms, respected community leaders, active civil society organizations, intergroup dialogue forums, independent judiciaries, truth and reconciliation processes, cultural norms of tolerance, or religious institutions that advocate non-violence. That is step 3. In short, what can be deduced from these 3 steps could be that the first step is to make sure to identify, when we are trying to analyze conflict, identify the main issue of the conflict and understand what the level through which the conflict the stage of the conflict. Understand the stage of the conflict by knowing what caused it and what if you should go further, what can also happen, what the repercussion of the conflict can be. So step two is to also understand the actors involved in the conflict. Try to focus on the actors, understand each actors, what the team A wants, what team B wants, understand who is also affected by the conflict. And the step three is analysis of capacities for peace. Reach out and make sure to analyze. This is for peacekeeping and peace management. Reach out to the parties involved through different platforms that are significant. So now let's look at the methods in conflict analysis. We have foundational analytical frameworks, and under that we have conflict tree. This conflict tree is added by what we mean by conflict tree is identifying root causes. What is the root of the problem? We call problems and effects. So now the second one is conflict onions, that is the layers of conflict, where we have peace back position to interest to the needs or values. Also we have the ABC triangle, which means that which entails attitudes, behavior, context, or contradiction. So this ABC triangle was developed by Joan Gatong, and it says that it should be the analyzer should analyze the interplay of attitudes, behavior, and structural contradiction. Sorry about that. So now, and the fourth one we have conflict mapping. So that is actor mapping, those that are involved. They visualizes parties, their relationship, their power dynamics, alliances, and division. So try to understand that too. Then the timeline or the conflict history. By doing this, understanding the timeline of conflict history, analyzer should plot key events, turning points, and the escalation phases, and the like. So two, we have still under methods in conflict analysis. We have two to be systemic and structural analysis. The first one was foundational and analytical frameworks, that is looking for the foundation of the conflict. So now we have systemic and structural analysis. So according to Gatton's conflict triangle plus violence triangle, we have direct structural and cultural violence, which links to conflict formation. Number two, we have needs. We have needs fear mapping. So this is based on human needs theory, according to Bolton Rosenberg. So by mapping out universal needs and fears, blocking their fulfillment. So we also have pillars analysis, which could be UNDP or World Bank. By analyzer should try to identify pillars that sustain violence. Thank you. Also, we will be looking at we also have power interest grid or influence interest maxes. So analyzer should classify actors by power. To try to classify actors, the individuals or groups involved in conflict, by power and level of interest. To try to classify them with this, analyzing conflicts will be very easier for the person. So in conclusion, this module has been able to cover the meaning and the basic fundamental aspects of conflict dynamics and analysis. So in wrapping up, it is clear that conflict dynamics are the ever-moving heartbeat of any dispute, a complex system where material interest, security fears, and identity narrative constantly interact, creating